Welcome to Brainstoryum. I'm Anna Tizard, award-winning dreampunk and deeply weird fantasy author. And yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. Explore and imagine with me the most unexpected story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. Find out more and join in at annatizard.com. This is a storytelling challenge unlike anything you've tried before. Happy New Year to you, imaginative people! I'm Anna Tizard and this is episode 71 of Brainstoryum. It's 2025. It really is. Actually, it's the 1st of January as I record this, and in the UK it is ridiculously windy. I hope you can't hear any of that, hoping that the editing software will take care of that. Anyway, Happy New Year to you. I hope you've had a wonderful and restful break over Christmas. Have you made any New Year's resolutions? Have I? I tend to avoid making heavy-going decisions in the middle of winter when my natural inclination is to hide under a duvet with a torch and a good book. But it's a difficult idea to resist because it seems so positive and everything around you seems to scream, New Year, new you, when really, surely your personal New Year is your birthday. Although, the more I think about it, I'd say springtime is the natural New Year. If anything, I mean, if the trees and the plants can be bothered to wake up and do something, well, maybe I can make the same effort at that time, not when I'm this sleepy. I'd say don't make resolutions because the adverts say you should, or if other people say you should. Do it if it helps you gain clarity on what you'd like to achieve. For my part, it's difficult to set goals beyond my regular goal of producing this show. I don't talk about it much these days, but I am still struggling with the dregs of long COVID, which means just working full time is hard. I spend about half my life in bed, about 12 hours a night, which is quite ridiculous. So my writing time is squeezed. All of my time is squeezed. And you might say I've already got my hands full with Brainstoryum stories. The regular goal of 3 story brainstorms per fortnight, hopefully including one story that's either complete or on the way to something I can complete, is a fair amount to be getting on with in the circumstances. I would like to be able to release a new book-length collection of stories sometime this year, but there's no point putting pressure on myself because I will manage to do what I manage to do. Anything beyond Brainstoryum is a bonus. That's probably the most positive stance I can take. So when it comes to resolutions, I'm just thinking along the lines of general aims, a general sense of direction in what I already do. And a general aim I have is that I would like to try and share with you more about my writing process in this show and see where that goes, if that's like what you'd like to hear. It's not just having a long-term illness that can make resolutions tricky for anyone. I think for most people, it's too easy to push ourselves too far, at least in the planning process, when we really want to achieve a big goal, and to set ourselves up for something that might not be achievable in the time span we're looking at. Smaller goals that are part of a bigger whole, like short stories which might turn into a book in time, is a good example of keeping the next small and bite-sized goals in your sights without risking being overwhelmed by the bigger picture, the bigger goal. And after all, the only thing that's going to help any of us achieve a big end result, like a finished book, is dedication to the process of writing. Love the process. Dedicate yourself to the process of whatever it is that you're doing, and that will get you there in the end. Fixating on the finished product might even inhibit your creativity and certainly your sense of spontaneity along the way. You might even miss opportunities if you're keeping just the one end result in your sights. I say the more you enjoy the journey, the more joy and fun you experience in the journey itself, the better the end result will be. So with this in mind, and with a gentle sense of pursuing the wonder and inspiration that leads to stories, let's see what crazy, unexpected joys and journeys await us in the socks of destiny. That's right, and for those who haven't played before or listened before or can't remember, hey, it's the new year, these things happen. Exquisite Corpse mixes words and phrases from different players into a randomized sentence that goes describing word noun, action, describing word noun. And so I reach into the describing word sock for the first word of the year. Ooh, I've got something that's got stuck on my finger, clearly wants to come out. This is from Sophie de Soles. Flamboyant. That's a good one. A flamboyant start to the year. Colourful, kind of out there. It feels like it's a big word. Next word is from Alessandro Bozzo. Acrobat. Ooh, I like this. This is starting to feel circusy. And yeah, circuses are a great basis for any story, I reckon, a great setting. So, from the action sock, I have a phrase from Paul Thomas. Jumped into. The flamboyant acrobat jumped into something. Well, that kind of goes. This feels like this is making sense for some reason. What's going on? Randomness, do not abandon us now. Right, the next word is from Mariah. Impossible. Ooh, I like that. You could put that in front of almost anything and turn it into a really curious object. In fact, that would make a great writing prompt, whatever you did. I'm looking at my mug while my tea is brewing. The impossible mug, the impossible tea, the impossible room, the impossible day. You could literally turn anything into a bizarre, surreal experience by putting the word impossible in front of it. So it's a very good word. I like it. So the final word of this Exquisite Corpse is from Paul Thomas again. Sheep. There it is. And so we have arrived at the strangeness. The inexplicable has finally made itself known in this Exquisite Corpse. So the entire sentence is: the flamboyant acrobat jumped into the impossible sheep. Right. Do you know what? I'm looking at my mug again, and I think it's time to pour the magical green tea and see if this helps. I really think you'll be able to hear this wind outside. I keep getting rain knocking against the window, so that's me knocking my spoon. But I still think you'll be able to hear the weather, unfortunately. Right, I think that's brewed enough. Okay. The flamboyant acrobat jumped into the impossible sheep. Well, that is an impossible thing to do. How can you jump into a sheep unless you're colliding with the sheep? Right. Okay. So, an impossible sheep, though. This must be a sheep that breaks all the rules of what a real sheep is, which kind of lets us off the hook, in a way, from trying to make precise sense of a literal sheep in this story. So it must be a model of a sheep that does impossible things, a model of the sheep that is in this circus. This circus with a farm theme. It's part of a grand magical trick, a magic trick. I mean, what can sheep not do? Fly, levitate, perform acrobatic acts. Maybe the impossible sheep could be an area in the circus stage that has a big illustration of a sheep, or a big projection through some kind of light show. If this really is a circus that has a farm theme, which is strange in itself, or something else an acrobat might jump into, like a trampoline with a big picture of a sheep on it. Why would you do that? Oh gosh. Well, if this is a circus with a farm theme, I really want to see models of pigs with wings dangling from the ceiling. Or maybe some of the high-flying acrobats could be dressed as pigs with wings, as a joke, as they seem to fly through the air from one trapeze to the next. But none of this is quite satisfying me. What is the impossible sheep? There has to be something more to intrigue me into a storytelling state of mind than a farm-themed circus, much as I love circuses. Now, I'm starting to think about the sheep you count in your sleep. They're impossible, aren't they? I mean, counting sheep, in my experience, does not work. It's impossible in that way. Does anyone ever really use that as a method of getting to sleep? Seems like a myth. Started by shepherds, probably, way back when. But for the sake of a story, let's use this dream idea, because I can feel a little bit of dreampunk coming on. What if this isn't a circus with a farm theme? What if it's a circus of dreams? What do I even mean by that? It's just a phrase that's come into my head. A circus that's so extraordinary, it gives you weird dreams afterwards? Or by some mysterious magic, the show plays back to you images you've seen in recent dreams. But then that would be different for different audience members, so how could that work? So how about a circus that has a theme around nighttime and dreams, and maybe the audience slips into a dreamlike state during the performance? Something to do with the lulling music of the first act. The lights are lowered to almost complete darkness. Then tiny lights rigged high up against the ceiling of the big top tent sparkle into being. A round white light is projected onto a giant paper moon that edges its way up the back. Small spotlights swivel onto an acrobat poised on the slim platform, readying herself to jump onto a trapeze bar. A harp picks out a delicate tune as she moves forward. Her name is Rebecca, but there's a moment when she steps out here each night, when, For one split second, she's unsure of her name. She tells herself it's the magical setting, the atmosphere, combined with her deep concentration. The tension of the audience is palpable. It buoys up this strange heartbeat, a moment of uncertainty. She gives her head a little shake to clear it, braces herself for the plunge. She steps, she leaps, she catches the trapeze bar and is borne aloft, a flying creature. She might be anything. Right then, on the backswing, adjusting her grip, she is Rebecca again, and this is where she feels a slight separation of the two parts of her. Her dream self, carried on the audience's gasp, so it seems, and a vague fluttering awareness of what's going on, as if a part of her mind hums on underneath, a set of muscle memories so deep inside her cells, she no longer has to think about what to do. But something is different tonight. She steps, she leaps, she catches the bar, and in a shock that threatens to turn her muscles rigid, very dangerous up here, she spies in the side of her vision the impossible. She oscillates through the giant image of a field, like a projection of a film. One sheep, then another sheep, bounds over a gate in perfect sequence. A wild glance over the circus master in his top hat, always watching from behind that curtain on the left. He nods. It's what he warned her of in the beginning, though she thought it was just fanciful talk, something to get her into the mood of the performance. Work here and you will fly through people's dreams, he said. You will awaken their deepest imagination and find yourself surrounded by images not of your own making, nor of ours. Do not be afraid. Always take the leap and plunge into the unknown as if this is what you were born to do. It's happening. Some members of the audience are dreaming, and Rebecca is no longer just Rebecca, flying through inner worlds not her own. Where could you take this? I think the next thing to do would be to hone in on the character herself, Rebecca, how she arrives at the circus as a fully qualified acrobat, filling in for someone who's suffered an injury or has just retired from the circus. Try to see things through her eyes as the circus master, her new boss, speaks in this strange, enigmatic language about the magic of the performance and the circus flying through dreams. Then you could try exploring other characters in the same circus who've been there a while, who all believe in the same thing but have differing relationships to it. Maybe one of them has a soured view of it. What's happened there? Have they been cut off from their real life, bitter to leave a family behind? And then the shock of this scene, as she experiences the magic for herself, all her skepticism proved wrong. What is this circus for? Where does the magic originate? It's all about the questions from here onward, and how you answer them will guide you on the very individual imaginative pathway of this particular story. I think it's time to reach inside the socks of destiny for the next Exquisite Corpse. Okay, here goes. This is from Paul Benfield. Hesitant. Something to give us pause. Something to give a character pause. Unless they might be naturally hesitant, or there might be something that happens in this story to make them hesitant. And next word is from Paul Thomas. It's from Paul Thomas. It is not Paul Thomas. I don't think the real Paul Thomas is necessarily hesitant. Hunter. The hesitant hunter. What would make a hunter hesitant? a ferocious quarry, an animal that's unexpectedly turning on its predator, perhaps. Let's see what the action is. This is from Paul Benfield. Boarded the mailboat to escape from. Sounds like it might be a more complicated quarry if sneaking away on a boat that carries the post is your preferred method of escape. I'm not sure that would put off an angry bear or a wolf or something. Let's have a look. It was interesting that a hunter is the one to escape. You know, the hunter becomes the hunted. So the next word is from Mariah. Rude. Ooh, okay. The deer started swearing or something. Okay, let's try for the final word. What or who was rude to this hunter, making them hesitate and making them want to escape on a mailboat? This is from Mariah again. Day. The rude day? Because what could be more terrifying to a hunter with a quiver of arrows at her back and maybe a short sword at her thigh, and of course a little dagger tucked in her right boot because you have to have backup, right? She has killed deer to survive. She has killed men for a fee. But now she must escape from the horrors of the rude day? The day has been rude to her. It feels like an overarching thing rather than something specific. She's had no luck all day. She failed to get her kill. She's thinking of moving to another area, quietly unseen, so no one knows. No one knows that she's gone. No one will be able to find her. But no matter what has happened, does that make the day rude? It's made me want to look up the word rude because none of this is really working. I have my concise Oxford Dictionary. Let's have a look. Here we go. Number 1, offensively impolite or ill-mannered. Well, I was expecting that one. That's how I understand the word rude. Number 2, very abrupt, as in a rude awakening. Okay, maybe I'd forgotten about that. I'd forgotten about that meaning. 3, chiefly British, vigorous or hearty. I did not know about that one. Not sure if that helps us, if we have a vigorous or hearty day. And there's a number 4, which is archaic, roughly made or done, lacking sophistication. Oh no, I have heard that. I've heard that maybe in, say, high fantasy, something roughly made, a rudely made sword or something. The origin of the word rude is from the Latin rudis, meaning unwrought, figuratively uncultivated, and related to rudus, which means broken stone. This is curious. Broken stone. You could do something with the day of the broken stone. That feels like it means something in a fantasy world, or a world just like this one, but altered in certain magic-touched ways. So what if we revisit this as the hesitant hunter boarded the mailboat to escape from the day of the broken stone? Is that an event she'd rather not attend? The place is different every year. Smoke trails from small fires, wafting smells of roasting meat, between the marquees where hunters linger and chat. In the centre of the clearing stands the makeshift hut. It has to be the one. It's the cue that gives it away. Hunters no longer chatting softly, but waiting in a solemn line, each ready to sharpen their knives and swords on the sacred sharpening stone. Under the weathered eye of the Ancient One, standing guard under the narrow roof in his hand-stitched robes, our hunter finally reaches the front of the queue. She steps forward, gives a small bow, then draws her sword across the edge of the stone. An awful crack fills the air. A dozen expressions flash over the Ancient One's face, and our hunter is transfixed, unable to move as she stares into shock, incomprehension, anger, disbelief, shock again, abject terror. His face tells 100 stories in less than 10 seconds. There are gasps and shuffles from the people behind her, but she cannot look away, even as two men grab her by each arm and pull her away into a nearby tent. She's left in there with an astounded-looking mother and child chewing half-forgotten barbecued ribs. Harsh voices outside the tent rise into an argument. What has happened? What is wrong with her sword, or her swordsmanship, that has destroyed this sacred stone? But she cannot just stand here and wait for judgment. A finger to her lips, she lifts the corner of the tent and dashes into the woods. At some point, she climbs a tree to hide while huntsmen spread everywhere, searching the forest for any sign of her. But she's light-footed and good at covering up her tracks. As the sun begins to sink, she hears the grumble of a boat's engine, a mail boat where she can hide and hitch a lift to anywhere but here. What if there's a prophecy around this, the breaking of the stone? This could work as the basis for a high fantasy story. You even have a title ready, The Day of the Broken Stone. All this from the rude day. Or the hesitant hunter boarded the mailboat to escape from the rude day. I never thought I'd look up the word rude in the dictionary, but I'm glad I did. I highly recommend just using the dictionary randomly at times. It's a thing full of words, about words, and burrowing down into the origins of words sometimes casts an imaginative pathway in itself, taking us to places we weren't expecting from simple, obvious-seeming words like rude. I think it is time to find our third and final exquisite corpse of the day. Okay. By the way, it is now rain is hurling itself against the window. I have no idea if this can be edited out, but there it is. That's the UK for you in January. So our first word is from Kester Park. Tremulous. Ooh, that's an interesting adjective. So sort of, I think usually you'd use tremulous if someone is trembling out of anxiety or nerves. Our next word is from Alessandro Bozzo. Ooh, gargoyle. A tremulous gargoyle. That's unusual. How does a piece of stone tremble? Next word or phrase, because this is now an action, is from Mark. Switched. That is a curious action. What could that mean? Switched. In a way, it's quite good to have, sometimes to have a sort of slightly vague action that makes you ask questions, because questions lead to stories. Next word is from Fraser Armitage. Inebriated. So we have a drunken character. Do you know, this is very crumpled, this little slip of paper. I think it's been buried a long time in the bottom of the describing word sock because it's inebriated. The next and final word is from Mariah. Squirrel. Of course it's a squirrel. Okay, so all together we have the tremulous gargoyle, can't even say it, the tremulous gargoyle switched the inebriated squirrel. What on earth does that mean? Didn't we have a squirrel in the last show? The Christmas show. There was, what was it? There was a wilted squirrel, and it was based around shape-shifting. So I feel I ought to try something different here with the inebriated squirrel. But this repeated theme of squirrels has led me to use the pause button and look up another word I never expected to look up, this time on Wikipedia, one of my favourite sites. And I don't know what I was expecting to find, but I actually came across a rather unlikely Marvel comic book hero I have not heard of, called Squirrel Girl. Also known as Doreen Ellen Green. Doreen has a genetic anomaly which gives her the ability to communicate with squirrels. Of course it does. She has a squirrel sidekick called Monkey Joe. Initially, Squirrel Girl was a side character working as a super-powered nanny while attending New York University. But then in 2015, she starred in her own series, The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. The title was, apparently it's kind of a twist on this clearly impossible idea of such a light-hearted character being able to defeat the usual sort of high-level Marvel villains, supervillains. But she was essentially unbeatable, in inverted commas, because she always pursued non-violent solutions, befriending villains and helping them turn their lives around, rather than actually fighting them. What's not to love? There, I'm so glad I looked that up. I sort of love it and laugh at it at the same time. But hey, you've effectively said you want to hear about squirrels. My listeners want to hear about squirrels. So what do? I go and look up crazy information about squirrels. Not really factual information, but hey, this is a fantasy show. Anyway, back to the Exquisite Corpse. After that little sidetrack there, the tremulous gargoyle switched the inebriated squirrel. I'm not sure Squirrel Girl can come to the rescue on this one, but I'm still glad I know about her. But as I said, because of the Christmas show, where I did the shape-shifting interpretation, I feel I ought to find a different explanation for an inebriated squirrel. Although the literal translation is as unlikely, surely, because, well, if an animal eats fruit, they can get drunk, potentially, if they come across fruit that's fallen from trees or bushes a while ago and has had time to ferment on the forest floor. I've heard of this happening in rainforests where monkeys come across fruit that's been sitting there for a while and get a little drunk. But a squirrel eats nuts, so I don't think that can happen naturally. A drunk squirrel, taken literally, would have to mean someone has tampered with their food or their water. And why would anyone do that? So I'm thinking this will have to be a non-literal inebriated squirrel, but nothing's coming to mind quite yet. At the other side of the Exquisite Corpse, we have a tremulous gargoyle. As I said, tremulous usually means trembling because of nerves or anxiety. Well, that's a curious trait in a gargoyle anyway, if it were alive and could move and speak and think. Apart from being solid, made of stone or aggregate, they don't seem like anxious things sticking out their tongues and presumably designed to protect against evil spirits. I'd expect them to have a more hardy attitude. But then again, an unusual trait, something that doesn't fit a character, is generally a useful thing, I find. Anything in storytelling that makes you go, huh, is a kind of conflict. You expect conflicts in a plot. Conflicts in the characters are, in a way, more interesting and bring an added complexity that draws you in and makes you care about what happens, which is arguably more important than what happens. Well, then there's a subject for debate. But of course, the conflicts in one plot will in some sense be reflected in the conflicts of the other character. Plot and character being two sides of the same coin, you might say. But how and why would a tremulous, nervous gargoyle switch an inebriated squirrel? What does that even mean? It is time for the magic of the pause button. They called it the Stoneworks, though no one outside it knew why. No one went near enough to find out, unless you were unfortunate enough to be related to one of the inmates, and that wasn't something you'd easily admit to. Stoneworks was a prison. Surrounded by the ruins of a 10th century church, some of which formed a part of the foundations, the prison was a squat, sprawling patchwork, modern brickwork and recycled stones melding with the ancient crags, their roots buried deep in the hill. A prison for unusual criminals. It housed werewolves, vampires, and a small gang of Devonshire pixies, split up, of course, across the 4 different wings. No one wanted to see a repeat of the West Country riots. For pixies are plotters, given the chance to mumble and squeak amongst themselves. Even exercise time in a walled-off section of the surrounding woodland was done on a strict rota to separate species according to their nature and lusts. Perhaps the strangest of all were the guards, also known as the Fallen Ones. Each one a gargoyle, or a part of one, that used to grimace or gawp from a corner of the ancient church had literally fallen from their original posts. Being made of stone, they could travel by stone, sink into the brickwork and re-emerge elsewhere in a heartbeat. To keep things light-hearted, they had names like Chip, Scuttle, Scrape and Alabaster. But to stand in the presence of one of these beings was to sense timelessness itself, a fragment of history carved from a piece of the earth itself. Even the vampires were nervous around them. The trouble began when Chip sidled through the stonework in the middle of a poker game. A pixie squealed, scattering its cards. The 3 vampires it was playing with froze, for a moment almost as stone-like as the guard himself. Chip didn't wait for the little creature to gather itself or its dropped cards, and simply held out the card he'd found on the canteen floor that morning. "What is the meaning of this?" "Oh, there's my ace! There's my ace!" he shouted, jabbing a blue twig-like finger at the card. One of the vampires sighed. "Not the suit, this," said Chip, pointing at a tiny sketch in the corner of the card. Faint, but not unnoticeable. The pixie leaned forwards, peering hard at the picture as if it struggled to make it out. A growl rolled in the pit of Chip's throat. Pixies had excellent eyesight. "Oh, I don't know what that is." "It's clearly a badger. With a bottle," Chip added, a question mark lilting his voice. Another one of your weird little drawings that keep cropping up." The pixie's eyes opened wide at this, two deep black pools of innocence. "My little drawings, sir, not one of mine. I can't draw to save my life." "No, and it won't save your life either." Chip threw back before dissolving into the wall behind him. Alabaster would have known what to say. Biting his lip against some other better line he could have come out with, Chip didn't move on, just stood there, a part of the stones, watching the inmates resume their game. But of course, they guessed he would still be there. This was the one advantage he really had against these vicious, powerful creatures, aside from strength: surprise and the ability to observe them in secret. He narrowed his eyes, and the stone around his face pinched in response to the subtle movement. This was why the pixies had taken to using this new form of code. It had to be. Drawings couldn't be eavesdropped, and their meanings were harder to decipher. The use of runic writings had been banned a month ago. Their enigmatic properties made the guards nervous. To think, aside from the simple messages, the pixies might be exchanging coded plans to break out or start a riot. Since then, at least one of the pixies had begun to take up doodling, drawing cartoons and sketches of woodland animals in unlikely positions, often appearing drunk with a tiny bottle next to it, its eyes rolling to the back of its head. Right then, Alabaster was in his office, staring at the most elaborate piece of art yet. The teddy bear's picnic was a strange but detailed picture the chief guard had hung on his own wall, just so he could examine it afresh each morning, sipping a cup of dew, hoping some inspiration might strike around some hidden meaning or code. The leaves on the trees at the edges of the picture were clear of any rune shapes. The checkered picnic blanket in the middle was also free of joined-up angles that could mean something more in runes. The teddy bears eating and handing out sandwiches made him pull a face each time he looked at it, their obvious round-eyed innocence a little too obvious, like that look the pixies gave whenever they were lying, which was most of the time. The one thing that seemed out of place in this picture was a squirrel that dangled inanely from a nearby tree, pulling a face at the party while swinging a bottle. An inebriated squirrel? It had seemed such a ridiculous addition, a mockery by the own artist, of this oh-so-innocent scene. But this was the first example of a theme that was to repeat itself in a few more other drawings that had cropped up since on tissues, napkins, and other scraps of paper. An image of a natural woodland creature, drunk and holding or sitting near a bottle. What did it mean? I'll stop there because this is getting rather long and I will need more time to think this over and work out what happens next. But my suspicion is that this is indeed a plan by the pixies to break out, and their drawings are code for which of the local woodland creatures they have got on their side, or possibly an instruction as to which ones to target next and get on their side, because they are ganging up with either the vampires or the werewolves to turn these innocent woodland creatures into supernatural beings, or give them some kind of magic based on their own powers. And this will involve using some kind of tincture or potion so that the woodland creatures aren't completely turned into, say, werewolves or vampires, but have a certain amount of their powers, which they will use in turn to help these inmates escape, once there are enough of them. The drawings aren't actually of inebriated woodland creatures, though the pictures certainly make them look that way. It's something to do with the dizzying effects of the magic as it takes hold of them. Well, I shall have to have a think on this one. It feels ripe with possibilities for development. The funny thing is, I haven't quite worked out or followed the exact meaning of the Exquisite Corpse, because how did the tremulous gargoyle switch the inebriated squirrel? It's a stretch to say that switching could mean interpreting or misinterpreting the meaning of this drawing of an inebriated squirrel, but in a way, the sentence was so tricky to unpick. And it's the difficult ones, the really difficult ones, that make you think the hardest and the longest. So even if I haven't managed to solve it completely, it set me off on the beginning of a story I never would have dreamed of on my own. And so Exquisite Corpse fulfills its purpose once more. I will also add one little thing about my writing process here, because when I began, I was tempted to keep going with the descriptions of the place, the way it functions, and details about the guards and the inmates, like a history of the place. And while there's nothing wrong with a bit of description, and to some extent the reader wants this information to snuggle into the world that they're entering and to understand it, you don't want to create what is known among writers as an info dump or a description dump. Tempting as it is to keep on describing at the beginning, it's important to get on with telling the story. While a description is going on, nothing else is happening. There is no movement in the story. The plot stands still. And the reader is essentially waiting for something to happen. Same as I'm waiting for this rain to just stop battering itself against the window. Honestly, this is be a miracle if I get to edit this out. In which case you'll be thinking, what is she talking about? But back to descriptions at the beginning of a story. No matter how much you think a reader might be enjoying the picture that you're painting, the story is static for as long as you're describing. And if you think about it, this story, as I read it out, my little draft, the story itself only really began when Chip steps out of the wall and the pixie drops its cards. I even think that the beginning I read out to you today is too heavy on description, and if I had longer to prepare before recording this show, I would find a way to extract some of those details and spread them out, sneak them in elsewhere in the story, the longer story, once it's fully written. The best method, in my opinion, is probably to allow yourself to splurge whatever you like in your first draft. Just write freely. But then when you go back to edit it and to shape it into a story, make sure something happens as soon as possible, and then find ways to slip in these details you've written here and there between stuff that's happening. For example, a secondary character speaks, and as part of your protagonist's reaction, you might be able to sneak in a relevant detail that helps generally build a sense of their world and the world of the story. So, from acrobats flying through dreams, to a hunter on the run, to a prison of supernatural beings guarded by ancient gargoyles. I hope you enjoyed the scenes and stories and writing tips of today's show, and that I've given you some inspiration for your own writing in 2025. But which writing prompt shall I invite your feedback on this time? Because I didn't do that last time. I was feeling very lazy over the Christmas period. How about the tremulous gargoyle? I do like that one. Why would a gargoyle tremble nervously? Time for you to tell me what you think that's all about. Until next time, go forth and be inspired. I hope you enjoyed today's Brainstoryum. You can find out more about Exquisite Corpse and my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, at annatizard.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter and you'll get Volume 1 for free. And while you're there, why not submit a few words to the Socks of Destiny on my play page. You may inspire me or inspire yourself to write a unique new story. See you next time.